Hi, everybody. Today I have Jeanne Bliss with me. Now, Jeanne has been in the advising people in customer experience since 1983 and has her own customer experience company called Customer Bliss. Now, Jeanne is one of the leading authorities in this area, and as you can see, has written two books, which we're going to talk about. But first of all, before we do that, Jeanne, would you just want to give a little bit of intro to yourself and your expertise?
Sure, happy to do that. As you mentioned, I've been doing this work in customer experience before it was called customer experience. Starting as a practitioner in 1983, I reported to the senior executives of Land's End, then Mazda Corporation, then Coldwell Banker Corporation, then Allstate Corporation, and finally Microsoft, all in the first ever customer experience leadership role, which I did all of those roles until about 2002, at which point I hung up my own shingle called Customer Bliss, and now I coach the C-suite around the world based on real practical experience of trying to drive and unite the leadership team to build a customer-driven growth engine.
Fantastic. And if you just want to, these three books, just want to give a brief description for the audience about their content and what they're really saying about customer experience.
Sure, happy to, and thank you for the question. The first book came out in 2006. It was called Chief Customer Officer, Getting Past Lip Service to Passionate Action, and that was really that is the book that I wish I had had on my desk when I was doing that work for over 20 years inside of these corporations. And so I wrote that to get down for others, and it was very, very early days. I had to actually really compel my publisher to call it Chief Customer Officer. Nobody had really coined a book in that term before, and it really wasn't part of our vernacular. And so that was really my gift back to the practitioners, to turn this into a methodology, to validate that this is a role and is a career path.
Yes.
And the second book I wrote is called I Love You More Than My Dog, 5 Decisions that Drive Extreme Customer Loyalty and Good Times and Bad. And this is really the vision book. This is the book that CEOs buy by the box load for all of their organization to say, we need to decide to be this kind of a company that is prosperous in both its employee prosperity, financial prosperity, and customer prosperity by making decisions and being deliberate about the kind of company we will and will not be.
Mm-hmm.
And Chief Customer Officer 2.0 is a book that was just released in 2015, and what that's based on is that 12-year period, that 10 to 12-year period from when I left Microsoft, my last corporate engagement, through all of these years of coaching around the world.
Yes.
And it is the practical guidebook. It's a very, very practical roadmap about how to do this work based on my experience, but the experience of many other corporations around the world that I've worked in.
Sure. And all these are available on Amazon, I'm guessing. And Chief Customer Officer, that's your latest one, is that right?
Chief Customer Officer 2.0 is the latest one. Yeah. And they're all available at the major places, Amazon, 800 CEO Read, Barnes & Noble. Any of the major booksellers have all three of those books.
Now, I'm kind of interested in something, Jeanne, because I'm in the UK, and this term Chief Customer Officer, I'm not too sure that it's that common in the UK, but I get the sense it's a lot more common in the US. What does a Chief Customer Officer actually do that's different from, say, marketing director or customer service?
Well, that's a great question, and that's actually why I've written these books. And there's a lot of, I think we're sussing out the marketplace, and let's not get stuck on the title or the person, but rather the role in terms of what needs to get done. Mm. And the idea around this work is that there needs to be a uniting approach that brings all of the silos together to do and build a deliberate experience that improves customers' lives, that starts with the customer stages of the journey, or the customer's needs and goals and values, and operationalizes how the company will execute on these things. Mm. These set, I call them competencies. These competencies need to be embedded inside the organization, so it's not about reacting to survey scores or have a leader go out into the field and react to something and come back and say we need to work on it, because so much of this customer-driven work is very reactive, but rather creating a deliberate path that builds in competencies that unites leaders, changes what they define as success based on customer behaviors, redefines how they drive accountability, unites multiple sources of listening to give feedback organized by customers' lives, changes how they drive accountability to processes and operations, and changes leadership behavior for how they enable employees to do their best work. And so this can be absorbed and led by the CMO, or some organizations have decided to bring in a chief customer officer or a VP of customer experience. There's many titles that would hold it, but it's more about the competencies versus the title. I use the title as a proxy, if you will.
And you talk about 5 competencies, I believe, in Chief Customer Officer 2.0. Can you just give a brief overview of what the key ones are, what those 5 are?
Sure, happy to. And an easy way to think about these is to embed inside of the organization a way to tell the story of customers' lives. So we make the engagement of our leaders and our organizations in understanding what to do and what the priorities are experiential as well. So competency 1 is simply a simple articulation of customers voting with their feet. As a result of the experience you delivered in the past month or quarter or year before annual planning, how many new customers did you bring in, volume and value? And that requires the organization aligning around even what they call new. And in that same period, how many did you lose? So that you get a real simple metric around net customer asset growth. And this is the clarity of this will galvanize leaders to recognize that our work is to keep more customers than we lose and to keep higher value customers than we lose as well. So that's competency 1. Competency 2 gives leaders and the organization a decision blueprint for how they build, realigning the work of the organization around the stages of the journey or the objectives from a customer standpoint. So rather than having accountability be marketing, operations, sales, what are you doing, instead make the accountability be, let's talk about the onboarding experience and how well are we doing in that. It shifts leaders' language, and it also unites the silos by requiring the operationalizing of actions that customers can see and feel and articulate back because they help them achieve something versus every silo doing their own thing.
Yes.
Competency 3 is around building a customer listening path, and that means using those stages as your guide or your frame, and then amalgamating and uniting multiple sources of feedback from customers. So that may be the trending of your complaints, it may be swiping through all your social media information, it may be research, but it's uniting it so that instead of leaders in our organization seeing one presentation on social research, another on survey results, another on secret shoppers, or whatever it might be, we instead bring it together and tell that story by stage of the journey so we can see where multiple sources of information are pointing to the same thing. Otherwise, there's this randomizing that occurs, and that's why people go off on kind of knee-jerk reactions. And we spend a lot of money in cycles, but it may or may not be on the one or 2 or 3 big things, and it again drives a lot of cycles through. Competency 4 I call operational listening. And this is your revenue erosion early warning system. It's and it's really around experience reliability, meaning if you know the stages of your journey, your leader should care about your operational business performance and your performance as a company in those processes with as much rigor as they care about sales performance. So if cycle time is critical, that should be something that you know and can fix and solve before you hear from it on customers from survey results. So that's really building that discipline and that muscle to measure and know the right things. And then competency 5 is culture, leadership, and decision making. leaders making decisions in the right way, enabling employees to have the accountability. But also what we do is we organize those things by stage of the journey. So we say, by stage of the journey, what's getting in the way of employees delivering the value? By stage of the journey, where are there stupid rules, excuse the language, that are preventing employees to deliver, and they always have to touch the desk or ask a manager. And so we continue to use that customer journey framework to make it operational and not, fuzzy, right? It feels so conceptual. But when you frame it by the stages, it gets more operational, more real, more tangible, and more actionable. So those are the 5.
Fantastic. And is there a roadmap for these 5? Do we do them all at once, or do we have to focus on one area first before we go to the next one?
Great question, and I spent a lot of time in the new CCO 2.0 book, and that's actually what this book does for you, is you don't have to, the idea of this is to crawl, walk, run. So, for example, competency 1, customers as assets, is one of the first things we almost always do right away because it attaches an ROI to the work and really simplifies what we mean by a new success metric. But, you don't need to go into every single one ad nauseum because we make the work implode because we try to take on too much. In fact, at the back of every chapter around these competencies, I give 5 very simple leadership, I call them recipe cards, that they can go do and take to get the action moving so that you're not boiling the ocean. Yes.
And, I mean, is there any firm actually doing this really well, in your opinion?
Well, there's some companies. I've had a lot of success with many organizations. We've seen some great activity that Adobe's done. They've done some really good work with Bombardier, unusual companies, Bombardier Aerospace.
Yes.
And it's really about first uniting the leadership team to take this on as a team. The whole idea of the role of the chief customer officer isn't to pin it on them and say, okay, pitch back to us when you're done, because that turns this role into being a beggar. The idea is to do this work with the leadership team as a united body, a united change management group.
And is it really difficult to break down those silos, though? Because, I mean, I'm getting that culture right. Because culture sounds like quite a big fish to fry. I mean, it's something people always talk about, but it's difficult to do anything about. Have you seen that as a blockage, or do you see other key blockages to getting traction around these 5 areas of business?
Well, that's why I break it into tactics. Culture is not what you say, it's what you do. And so when we start looking at the customer journey, if, for example, we say to our field force, be customer focused, but yet if you give the field reps so many customers to call on that they can't possibly deliver value to customers, that is telling them you want to be customer focused, but there's an incongruent reality that you're forcing them to live inside of. And so that's what customer culture is. It's not memos or saying we love our customers. It's changing what happens in the company to enable people to deliver value, to get rid of the roadblocks, and to start with the customer's objectives and operationalize delivering against that. And so that's why we ground the work of building a culture in the actions of delivering the experience instead of making it seem like this very unattainable thing.
Sure. And you also talk about growing business by improving customers' lives. That sounds a very motivating statement. Is it real? Can you actually do that? Is that really driving businesses at the moment?
It is real. And you know, for too long, we focused on what we could measure. And that's great and important. But what we're finding is the importance of really motivating leaders to care about this work is creating a methodology, and that's what these 5 competencies do. One of the big things that we really are proponents of with this work is building a customer room where you actually walk leaders experientially through what customers are going through. Yes. Show them the screenshots. Show them the broken links. Show them how many times somebody's tried to log in to get a trial. Show them how difficult it is to return a product. If we imagine and understand the humans at the end of our decisions and then can operationalize and show with real data, with real screenshots, with real experiential feedback, then leaders will be more motivated to take action than presenting them with data and results. So the whole idea of this is we need to take customers off the spreadsheet, off the data reports, and force our leaders to step in their shoes, walk through them, and make prioritized one company decisions on focusing on those intersection points that will mean the most and will drive the greatest results initially so that you can earn the right to continue to do other things.
Fantastic. And final question for myself, Jeanne. Where do you see the customer experience movement at the moment? Because it's been going for quite a while now, and a lot of people are now using the term customer experience, a substantial number of people. I do wonder whether many people are actually doing it right rather than just providing it as lip service. Do you feel it's still got a lot of traction, or do you think it's being a bit muddy the waters at the moment? How do you feel about it?
Well, I think there's a mixed bag. One of my fears with this, like many others, and I've been doing this work for a long time,
yes,
is that it's, we suffer a little bit from shiny object-itis, and I think that's happening. There are some tools that people are grabbing onto, surveys were one big one. Now people are really into journey mapping.
Yes.
But if we don't wrap all of those activities around leaders changing their behavior, driving how the business grows, driving how they act for accountability, metrics that have to change, then it's going to be a lot of tactics that don't necessarily transform the business. So I think there's a small percentage, maybe 20 to 25% of the companies who are taking this on that are looking at it holistically. Yes. And then I think we have a lot of tactical things going on that I'm not sure if, I know they're going to show, it will show progress and action, but it may or may not come out with the wholesale change that people are yearning for.
I mean, when you go into a big business and you sit down with the CFO, you say you really need that leadership to be driving and supporting this. And the first question they ask is going to be, what's the return on customer experience? Show me the ROI from the CFO. How do you broach that? Do you start with, I know you said you start with identifying, hitting that question right up front, but at the pre-sales point where you're trying to sell this in, do you use case studies? What sort of evidence do you provide that this really works?
Well, I don't really like selling. I don't sell as much as we will. A lot of people will say they want to commit to customer experience, and so what I usually do is we start with a small group, the C-suite, 5 to 10 people around the table,
yes,
and we'll do a little bit of math beforehand, and we'll actually run the real numbers of how many customers they brought in that past year and how many did they lose this past year. Yeah. And in many cases, they lost about as many as they gained, or they may have, not realized, because they're talking about retention rates, of the high volume of people who left them, or the high volume of high-value customers who left them, because their eye's not on that ball. Their eye's not on the customer as the asset. They're tracking and trending sales, yeah, or number of products sold. And we have to prove this flip. And so we prove this flip, and then they say, okay, how are we going to work on this? And then we walk them through the 5 competencies.
Fantastic.
And then they see the 5 competencies as a path to improve this, because of the loss of customers.
And which are the big growing sectors at the moment interested in customer experience? Is it financial services, healthcare? Which ones are the real drivers at the moment who are interested?
Well, certainly healthcare. Yeah. Yes, financial services. We've seen a lot of retail, and I have an enormous number of B2B companies very interested in this.
All right. Okay.
Manufacturing hard products, and the reason is, if you think about it, if they lose one of those big customers, that's a lot more money than an individual. Yes. So that's been very intriguing, and we've had a lot of success with B2B, very, very, very large Fortune 100, for example, in the U.S. B2B customers.
Very good, very good. Okay, that's fantastic. And we haven't spoken about the CXPA because I understand you're a co-founder of that as well. That's
I
the
am
professional
very
association.
proud. I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize. You
So
want to do that again?
that's the Professional Association for Customer Experience.
Yes, I'm very proud to have co-founded that, and it is an association that is really there to support and enable practitioners to make it be a career path for them, such as the path that I did on my own without having the benefit of something like the CXPA. We want to make the road easier and to create a network of peers to learn from each other.
Very good. And if people want to get in touch with you, use your techniques, have you in as a speaker and trainer and consult, are those the main activities you do?
I do keynote speeches and workshops with leadership teams around the world, and then coaching, yes.
Yes. And how should they get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn the best way, or go to your website?
Actually, my website is probably more direct, and it's Customer Bliss, Bliss, for my last name. I happen to marry a guy named Bliss. How lucky am I?
Okay.
So customerbliss.com.
Fantastic. Well, Jeanne, thank you very much for your time. It's been very interesting talking to you.
You're welcome. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.